So, oh, it's on. Wow.
Okay. Yes. But wait, before we start, one last question.
To the first slide because everybody can see it.
You know, I keep clicking like, where's this?
Okay, so hello everyone, welcome. Sorry.
C'est dans 5 minutes, hein. Il y a peut-être des gens qui ne sont pas encore connectés.
Okay. Thank you. Super. Okay, and our online speakers are just waiting to let me in. They're connected apparently. Okay, super. Okay, hello, welcome everyone to this late event on ACE, Action for Climate Empowerment. Today we are going to be focusing on how to deliver Article 6 of UNFCCC, but quality and context-relevant climate change education. How can we bring quality and context-relevant climate change education for all? And for this, we hope lively discussion. We have a set of panelists with us today in the room, but also joining us online. We will have WonJung Byun, team leader for the Green Education Partnership at UNESCO, joining us online. We will have David Wilgenbus, director of the Office for Climate Education, here with us in the room, as well as Temilade Salami, founder of EcoChampions Nigeria, in the room with us today as well, and Daniel Schaffer, Chief Executive Officer at FEE, the Foundation for Environmental Education, as well as online Deb Morrison, founder and director of Clear Environmental. Today we're going to be exploring how each of our panelists have been involved in developing quality and context-relevant climate change education for all. We'll have the first 10 minutes per panelist to explore this question, and then we will move on to an open discussion with you, the audience, but also between the panelists around a few more precise questions. So if everyone agrees, I propose we start, and for that I will give the floor to my colleague Temilade, sitting right next to me. Temilade, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Temilade Salami, just as he has introduced. I'm the Executive Director of EcoChampions. And what I do basically, or what I have been doing for the past 6 years, has been climate education and leadership. And today we're talking about contextualizing climate education. We all know that climate change is a complex issue, and we know it is a global crisis. But every solution must be contextualized for every community, reality, and country. And to solve the climate crisis, education has to be at the core and bedrock of climate action. Like we saw a few days ago, we had an education day at COP, but beyond that, it needs to be filtered into our educational systems. But most importantly, contextualized learning and teaching methods has to take place in our schools and communities. What works for Nigeria doesn't work for Paris, doesn't work for Uganda, and what works in Kenya obviously does not work in another country. So in one part of the world, there are ice glaciers and polar bears, but in another part of the world where I come from, we have flooding issues, droughts, and low farm yield. So the realities are so different. Today, I'll be sharing my experience leading EcoChampions in Nigeria for the past 6 years, while putting climate education at the core of our programs. The first program we have is the Teach for the Planet program, and the goal basically is to make teaching and learning about climate education as fundamental as reading ABC and 1, 2, 3. And we have two components. We have the teachers for the planet and the students for the planet. And what we do basically is to go to schools, teach kids about climate change. But very importantly, we use comprehensive classroom curriculum, interactive learning modules, and practical application of knowledge, and locally sourced context, because today we're talking about contextualized solutions. And we also encourage that the students are leading the charge on climate action. So it's not go to the schools, speak to them, and then we leave. We make sure that they are also leading on the conversation and asking relevant questions so that there's sustainability when it comes to taking action. We also engage with local knowledge. Like I said, what works in one country doesn't work in another country. And we collaborate with local actors, and we use a whole school approach. Over the past few years, one of the conversations I've seen, or some of the things I've noticed, is that we have our educational system, and then they try to bring in climate education as an extracurricular subject or activity, but that should not be the case. It should be integrated into our school systems. So here are some of the resources that we use to teach and learn. I'm going back to the screen, the first part. This was a tweet I made while I was at COP, and this was a lady who actually got the books that I wrote, and she went to use these books to teach in a school. The second picture, the lady wearing pink, she also got one of my books, and she's using it for a research project. And it just shows me that we need contextualized-based climate education. The reason why everybody can relate to this book is because it is very, very localized to the African context. So when you open the book, you can relate to every content in the book, right? So we also have it in group ages so that even if you are 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, there's something for you to learn about climate change. One of the things we also have in the book is that it is action-oriented. So we're not preaching the doom message and telling them that the world is burning, but what can you do about it? How can you hold your leaders accountable? How can you tell other people about it? So flipping through the book, the pages of the book, you see it is action-oriented, it is learner-focused, and is very relevant to their local context. And the second program we have in EcoChampions is our Climate Education Leaders Fellowship. And the basic aim of this is to raise the next generation of climate leaders. And at COP 2 days ago, I met a lady from Zimbabwe who was one of our fellows, and she launched her climate education book, which is actually on the previous slide, titled Don't Waste It, and she's from Zimbabwe. It also shows me that when we give people the agency and empower them, everybody can go back to their communities to replicate what works for them. So the key features of this fellowship, it is meticulously designed, and it covers a spectrum of topics, not just climate change, 1.5C, loss and damage, but building that agency and action and hope in those students. And it's very hands-on on the learning experience and translates theoretical knowledge into tangible, impactful solutions in each of their communities. We're also very big on collaboration. The reason why everybody is here is because we're collaborating for these events to happen and to also have this panel session, although we're in different countries, but one thing ties us together, and that's climate education. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation, and I would like to pass it to
David. Thank you so much, Temilade, for sharing your experience with us. We will circle back to it at the end of the panel with, I'm sure, a few more questions, at least from my side and most likely from the audience as well. Now, indeed, I would like to give the floor to David Wilgenbus, the Executive Director of the Office for Climate Education. David, please.
Thank you, Gia. So I will say a few words about the Office for Climate Education. So very rapidly, the OCE is a non-profit organization. We are based in Paris, in France. And we are a center under the auspices of UNESCO, so in charge of implementing operational activities in line with the UNESCO strategy and JEP strategies. And we are also an observing member of the IPCC. So basically, the OCE works on two legs, one scientific leg and one pedagogical leg. So far, we have been working with approximately 70 organizations in 30 countries in all the different regions of the world. So we consider ourselves as a connective tissue between the climate science community and the education community. Today's subject is to how to contextualize climate change education. So I will explain how do we come from IPCC reports to projects in classes in Latin America or Asia or Africa, for example. So First of all, as a partner of the IPCC, what we are doing is that we are supporting the different IPCC reports by education toolkits. And so we produce these education materials with the help of a lot of experts coming from the different regions of the world. Sorry. These materials are produced by scientific experts, IPCC authors, or IPCC technical support unit, but also educators, teachers, trainers, and so on. So we provide different kind of resources supporting the IPCC report. First of all, what we call the summaries for teachers. So it is inspired by the summary for policymakers, but as you know, this summary for policymakers are still very technical, and actually a normal teacher cannot read this kind of document. So we make a strong effort in the simplification, accessibility, we illustrate a lot, and we provide some education guidance in order to produce this summary for teachers of the IPCC report. And supporting this, basically this scientific documentation we provide to the teachers, we also produce turnkey, ready-to-use pedagogical guides for the teachers to implement activities in the class. So these teacher handbooks, so far we published 2 of them, one on the ocean and cryosphere subject, and on the other one on climate change and land topic. And we have 3 other teacher books in preparation today. These guidebooks are divided into basically 2 parts. The first part is We Understand, so it's a lot of inquiry-based pedagogy, role-playing games. It's very interdisciplinary. So the science, but also not only the climate science, but also the human and social sciences, the arts. We work on the emotion and so on. And the second part of this teacher guidebooks are made of projects. It is called the We Act section. So actually, the objective is to understand in order to be able to act properly. So we propose a lot of projects that has been tested in classes, implemented, and projects that are easy to implement. It's not projects for superhero teachers. It's projects for normal teachers in normal classes everywhere. So we produce a lot of other kind of documentation, so videos, multimedia animation, resources also for teacher trainers, not only for teachers, and MOOCs for self-training of the teachers. But these resources are produced by the OCE with the help of the international scientific and education community, but they are not specifically adapted to a specific context. They are international resources. So the second step, as soon as we have published this resource on different languages, in French, in English, in Spanish, in German, etc., we work with local partners in different regions, and these partners will start from our own resources and will work on how to adapt locally these resources to their context. So this adaptation is not only a translation, it's really a deep adaptation in terms of science, but also in terms of pedagogy. Of course, in terms of science, we have to make sure that the information that is studied by the students are locally relevant, the examples of the climate impacts, but also the solutions, mitigation or adaptation solutions, etc. They have to be rooted in the close environment of the students. But also the pedagogy has to be adapted, so we have to make sure that what we propose to the classes is coherent, in line with the local curriculum and so on, the material available in the classes. And we have also to make sure that it takes into account also the local culture and the indigenous knowledge, for example. So here on this slide, you can see examples of materials produced in Colombia, but we have other kinds of materials in a lot of other countries. But in Colombia, for example, they produce, based on our resources, they produce teacher handbooks, MOOCs, videos, animations, and that are specifically adapted to the Colombian context. Oops, a small problem with the the format of the slide, but it's not, anyway, it's not very important. So even the best resources need to be supported by training and professional development. So the teachers cannot be left alone with materials. They have to be trained in service, and most of the time, in service training. This is the most important given the size of the education community. So we provide a lot of teacher professional development opportunities. So it's not only a training sessions. It's training plus time for implementing in your class, plus feedback, plus training again, etc. It's a complete process with a minimum duration of 50 hours. This is what research tells us that it is needed for teachers to be really autonomous and self-sufficient for this new topic, because the climate change is very new for most of them. So our training sessions are content focused. So we work on really on the curricula. We use a lot of active learning and collaboration processes like experiments, role-playing games, group work, etc., etc. We work on the science, on the pedagogy, and also we help the teachers to design their own educational project for their own school. So, and it's very important, of course, to explain that this training sessions, this support is made by local actors as much as possible. So local experts, scientific experts, practitioners, policymakers, and so on. And it will be my last slide. So on one side, we have the development of locally relevant education materials. On the other side, teacher training and building capacity. And the last aspect is the design of communities of practice. This is very important because if we want to scale up, we have to allow also the teachers to work not only with scientists and trainers, but also with other teachers to help them communicate, exchange practices, and so on. And we have to open these communities, not only the teachers that are targeted by our action. We need also to speak to the school directors, school administrative staff, the ministries, the scientific community, the NGOs, the youth organization, of course, the parents, etc., etc. So we have to build these communities of practice to make sure that, that what will be done in the class will be locally relevant and involve everybody. So for doing so, instead, in addition to the projects that are set up in the classes, we also organize a lot of events. It could be local events, national events, or international events, also to provide visibility to what is done on the field. And we have had a nice example yesterday because in the Green Zone, we organized a Teachers' Cup where we showcased very good projects coming from different teachers in all the regions of the world. So all this approach, gathering resources, professional development, and communities of practice, we integrate all of this in what we call our middle scale field projects. Middle scale means that we target at least 1,000 to 10,000 teachers, basically. It's not full-scale project because it's not our mission. It's the mission of the Ministries of Education. And we don't have the resource to scale up. But it has to be big enough for the project to be able, from the very beginning, to allow the scaling up at the end. So if you concentrate too many resources on a few classes, on a few schools, you know from the beginning that you will not be able to scale up. So you have to design the project in order for it to be realistic to be scaled up. So for example, our project in Latin America, called ALEC, for America Latina para Educación Climática, this project targets directly 6,000 teachers, and with the help of the communities of practice and so on, so far we have involved more than 15,000 teachers. So this is quite successful, and so far this is the kind of the recipe we have found to be able to scale, and also to embed deeply on the local context or action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David, for showcasing a little bit how the OCE is bringing contextualized climate change education to places around the world. And now I would like to give the floor to Daniel Schaffer, CEO of the Foundation for Environmental Education, so he can give us more of an overview of their work on this subject. Daniel, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, John. So hi, I'm Daniel Schaffer. I'm the CEO of the Foundation for Environmental Education. And we're a non-for-profit organization, non-governmental organization that has been established by educators, environmental educators, back in 1981. And we promote sustainable development through environmental education. We act as an umbrella organization. We've got over 100 members today that operate in around 85 countries. So there's actually a few more since the slide came on board. These are mostly NGOs that through the membership in our organization get access to our programs and then implement the programs and disseminate them at the national level. We run, in reality, it's becoming now 6 programs. 4 programs are focused on the formal and non-formal education systems. The first is Eco Schools. This is a whole institutional approach program for education for sustainable development. It's run in over 50,000 schools today in about 95 countries all in all. I'll talk a little bit about that program in one of my next slides. What is absolutely fantastic about this program is that it's been running for 30 years. So there's children that have been from K to 12 always in an eco school. And when they arrived in universities, they started challenging the management of these universities. Why isn't the university an eco school? And through that, we've had an organic growth into EcoCampus. And today we've got about 200 campuses, universities around the world that are participating in our program. And I'll explain a little bit about it further on. We also run a program which is called Young Reporters for the Environment. And this is really a program that enhances the skills of young people to gain leadership skills through the practice of journalism. So they learn how to either write an article about environmental issues that are close to their heart, maybe it's a video or photography, and then how to disseminate that and to communicate that with their peers, with the community, and so on. But what's important is that a program like this develops critical thinking, data-based opinions. It helps to formulate ideas, which is something that I think we're lacking today with some of the way social media manifests itself. Actually, to be able to build an argument based on data, it helps them understand how multiple stakeholders are involved in a problem and try and present that also in the story or in their piece. And in the end, think of solutions that they might suggest for the problem that they have. And if I think of the politicians I would like to see, these are exactly the type of attributes that I would like them to have. So this is a good way to create leadership, and over many years we've seen through our alumni that indeed it does. Another program we run is called Learning About Forests, which is an effort to reconnect young people to experiencing nature and building that emotional bond that comes through positive experiences. And then because we're talking about the ACE here, and the ACE is not only about formal education or education with youth, but we're talking about the overall public as well. I thought I'd mention the 2 tourism-focused programs that we run, which are Blue Flag for it's a program that rewards excellent management of coastal assets, and the Green Key, which is an accreditation for the hospitality industry, so hotels, so on. And in those, we also embed education. So if you want to get that award for the Blue Flag, the municipality, for example, has to take a number of educational activities to engage the public and the schools in coastal issues, marine issues, and so on. So this is another way that we use to get people involved and aware of the issues we are facing. I think one of the interesting things is that the SDGs have been absolutely fantastic. They've created a kind of a benchmark. Everybody knows we're all talking the same language, but at the same time, they've also created a bit of an issue of diluting some of the focal areas of many of us, because everybody's trying to tick off 17 different SDGs for funding reasons or whatever. So one of the things that happened to us is that we reconvened and thought our strategy, and we came up with a strategic plan which is called Gaia 2030. And this basically says, look, we're a network of environmental organizations. We believe that these are the environmental topics that have to be addressed. And we built a strategy which we call, as I said, Gaia, which looks at climate change, loss of biodiversity, and pollution as the main topics that we want to work on. And this has been embedded in all the programs we're doing. So if we're creating now a revision of our criteria for Blue Flag, these elements are going to be heavily embedded in these criteria. So I spoke before a little bit about the eco-schools and the 7-step methodology. And I think the 7-step methodology is really an educational process that happens within a school with the aim of changing the culture within the school. It's not only a cognitive change, but in the end what we need to do is a change of culture, because that is what brings change in behavior. And if you look at our 7 steps are not the ones that you see here. They're defined differently, but this is an interpretation of these steps in the way it involves children within the school. So the first thing we do in the eco-school 7-step process is we create an eco-committee, which involves all the stakeholders, but should be led by the students as much as possible. The next thing is that we let them do an environmental review of their school and their community and figure out what are the things that they think need addressing. Then they need to create that action plan to figure out how they can actually address these problems and what can they do proactively to change the situation. After that, they need to connect that to the curriculum of the school. The next step would be to disseminate it through the school, because you don't want only the eco-committee to participate. You want the whole school community, the parents, the faculty, the technical management, everybody needs to be involved. And then they need to review what they're doing. So they need to, that's a self-assessment culture that we also want to teach them. And the last thing that we do is create an eco-code. Now the eco-code is really the ethos. That's the culture. If in a primary school, it might be a song, or it might be a song that they sing in the morning, while in a high school or in a university, it could be a much more complicated charter that the students define of what are the do's and don'ts and what is the pledge that they're doing, in their actions that they're willing to take towards their school and their environment. And the nice thing about it is that when they go through this whole process, it usually takes them at least 2 years to finish a cycle like that. They get assessed. They can ask to be assessed, and they're not assessed on how many liters of water they have saved, but have they actually gone through the educational process? We are talking about schools, and schools is where education happens. It manifests itself as technical aspects, as saving energy and reducing waste and saving water and having more empathy. But all that is driven through the educational process. I think I'll just finish with this one. Again, as I said, we're looking at active learning pedagogy in the school. This is very much based on action learning. We're definitely looking at training of the teachers, and that's how an organization like OCE and us are heavily involved together to figure out how we can increase the knowledge of the teachers, not only on the topic, but how to teach the topic. That's a very important thing. So we do that. There is a circular integration, as I said. It's a perpetual motion that happens in these schools. And then it's a whole school approach, so everybody needs to be involved in it. It's an agency for students, and they lead the process. And we involve the community through parents, through municipalities, through local NGOs. Everybody comes in together and works around the school in order to drive this. I think with that, I will say thank you.
Me too. Thank you, Daniel, for your presentation of well, your global activities in your approach and to providing as a network programs that actually bring to the schools environmental and climate change issues. Now I would like to ask you to turn the screen so we can see our online panelists who are joining us. And with that, once we do that, I would love to give the floor to Dr. Deb Morrison, founder of Clear Environmental Organization. And if Deb can hear me, I think she can. Deb can.
I can, thank you.
Fantastic.
Yes.
And we can hear you loud and clear. So please go ahead. Do let us know if you need help with your slides. I will be switching them for you.
Yes, if you just go ahead and switch on to, I can't see the slides on my screen right now.
Okay, so I have your systemic climate change learning capacity building slide. Your first slide.
Perfect, that's great. Thank you so much. All right, so it's so great to hear all of the examples of the different things that we have shared today. We're not getting any feedback in the room, are we?
No, it's fine.
Okay, we're getting an echo here, but I'll manage it. All right, so as we talk about transforming education, we also have to think about the entire system. We can't only think about what we want to see in the classroom. And because we have to think about the whole system, we actually have to think about learning across the entire system. So the Global Partnership on Education has written about this with their 7-dimension framework for action to create climate-smart education systems. And it touches on many of the different aspects that presenters today have already named, but it pulls it together as a whole systems approach. So not only a whole school, as I think Danielle was mentioning, but as a whole system approach so that we ensure that policy leaders, scientists and educators, community leaders, everyone across the entire system is working together in this direction. We've also written about that in the special issue of the Diplomatic Courier, which was for COP28, around the ideas of creating resilient, sustainable learning ecosystems. So we think about this as learning ecosystems. All right, I'm going to explain to you this through an example. So in Washington State, if we go ahead and advance, in Washington State, there's been an effort since 2018 called the Climb Time effort. And this effort is a statewide effort. And for those of you less familiar with the North American context, both Canada and the United States are federations. So they're federations where a lot of the powers reside in the provinces or the states. And so from an education perspective, the education systems are managed at the provincial or state level. So Washington State is an entire educational system unto itself. And in 2018, with a huge amount of work that had gone on there prior, the legislature funded the state to do professional learning for educators. So what was required to get to that point in the system was a coalition of people from all across the state. And this is an example of some of the participants in that network. There are now more than 80 different participants. These are just the sort of first seeds in the 2018 year. And they have now involved so many other organizations. Go ahead and advance. So as the initiative started in 2018, one of the core things that was needed was to actually build internal capacity for the leaders of the network. So people who were heads of educational service districts, which serviced thousands of schools. And so how we did that was we pulled together people in convenings 3 times a year, and we learned together. We learned science. We learned local context differences. We thought about what knowledge existed across the network and how to leverage it from one place to another. So our community-based organizations had amazing outdoor education and community-connected education. And our schools knew a lot about how to teach particular concepts or what challenges students had and teachers had in those contexts. So we learned together and from each other. And part of that learning, we actually created resources. In the organizational change literature, we think of that as infrastructuring. We provide sort of materials like what David was talking about and Temilade were talking about, with actual physical resources that are there in the classrooms. But in this context, we're actually building resources for educators and educational leaders, so professional learning providers, to actually think and share learning more broadly. And that's that scale up move that I think David was talking about. And then we also drew in from other efforts that were happening across the United States and across the world. We've actually brought in Office of Climate Education materials. We brought in not quite yet. We brought in clean resources. We brought in learning in places resources, and we shared back out. So we wrote articles out to the National Science Teachers Association, and we produced resources in the STEM teaching tools collection, which are available to anyone. So anyone globally can access those materials. And they were all around questions of practice. So how do I deal with controversy as I teach climate change? What does it look like to teach solution-centered teaching? What are active pedagogies? So we provide some detailed resources for educators to think about implementation and educators who are doing it to show and share their learning with others. So this whole effort is built around how do we build capacity initially in the system and expand it outward and scale it. All right, go ahead and to the next slide. So as we're working in the Climb Time effort, we're connected with bright spots across North America, in Canada and the US, and across the world. And we're not only sharing outward or drawing inward, we're doing both. So we're learning as we go from others, and we're doing that through things like this, sharing today, which I'm so grateful to be in collaboration with all these colleagues. And we're also building resources and sharing out things. So this type of work is both infrastructuring and a concept called not working. We don't want to be working in isolation. The most efficient way to change systems is to do it through tight networks, which are knotted together in all possible ways. So peer-to-peer, top-down, bottom-up, every direction we can think of. So in this map, you can see that Washington State's Climb Time effort is situated out here in the Pacific Northwest in the territory of the Salish people. And yet we're connected all across the North American continent and globally with so many others doing the work. This connective tissue needs support. It does not happen on its own. It needs funding, it needs time and space and connections. Go ahead and advance. So as we think about what our core model of climate learning is in the classroom, which we have a working model, we refer to as climate justice education, and it has a number of different components, many of which have been named here today: place-based, action-oriented, community-connected, really thinking about that evidence-based and transdisciplinary, that cultural change that was being talked about. We center our work in the experiences of marginalized communities, both the knowledges that are there and ensuring that those students and communities and families are invited into co-design learning with us as we contextualize. And then, so that's the student facing, which is at the core. But when we're thinking about this system of education and educational change, we need to be thinking about educators, professional learning, and capacity building for leaders across the system. So all layers of that system need support. All right. There are a lot of people working on this, if we go ahead and advance. In the Canadian context, I myself am Canadian and live in Canada, though I work broadly across the US and Canada. Just a shout out to Dr. Hilary Inwood and Drs. Ellen Field, who have started the Accelerate project in Canada called Climate Change Education in Canadian Teacher Education. So building a system of scholars and practitioners connected nationally who are supporting that systemic leadership. And that is just getting off the ground now in Canada, as is the Building Evidence in Education Climate Smart Education Systems Special Interest Group, which is a group of scholars, practitioners globally who are trying to synthesize research as it emerges. So all of this is happening in real time, and we don't want to wait for the traditional publication pathways that can delay knowledge sharing. We want to accelerate knowledge sharing at that educational system level. And so the Building Evidence in Education group has started a special interest group just around climate smart education. And I'm deeply grateful to both of these efforts for providing that connective tissue. One sort of caveat about that is most of the participation in these spaces is still voluntary because there's limited funding to support people's participation in this kind of effort. And we really need to think about that differently. All of the work that David was talking about thousands and thousands of educators and systems leaders, all of that work needs funding and support and is often hidden from most people. They think directly to the classroom, but to enable really stellar classroom work, we have to enable the system itself to be able to change and adapt. So thank you so much for the chance to participate today. And I greatly appreciate our community.
Thank you, Deb, for your presentation and for being such an active member of our wider climate justice and climate education community, always bringing a lot of evidence-based and smiles approach to us. With this, I would like to now give the virtual floor to our next colleague, our last panelist for the day, before we move on to the questions and the discussions with the audience. And with that, I would like to introduce WonJung from UNESCO's team in Paris. Won, go ahead if you can hear us.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon, everyone.
Perfect, we hear you right.
I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Brilliant. It's a funny experience because I hear myself back, so I'll try to be slow as possible to make sure. But thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'm sorry that I can't be there with you. But it's an amazing panel that we're wrapping up this great COP28, where we have achieved so much collectively. So I'm very honored to be part of this panel. If I may also see my screen on the slide, then I will be happy to start off. So today I would like to share briefly about the Greening Education Partnership and the work around, I love this word that Dev just used, not working. So making the knots and connecting the dots. I think the Greening Education Partnership at global level, that's exactly what we are trying to do to make sure that we move away from our individual silos and work together. So this work has started, of course, is rooted in the long-standing work in education for sustainable development, for which UNESCO has been the UN lead agency from the decade. And now Greening Education Partnership specifically focuses on one thematic area of ESD, which is on climate change. But while we use climate change as the entry point, it does not mean that we only focus on the scientific or environmental aspects of it, but rather connect all the holistic approaches cross-cutting to three pillars of sustainability on environment, social, and economic aspects, trying to ensure that we promote understanding, skills, values, and attitudes and action for having climate resilient societies. Next slide, please. So this Greening Education Partnership, as mentioned earlier, is all about synergies. So how we can work together, because we realized when it was first launched around the UN Transforming Education Summit, based on the Youth Declaration of the summit, which called for actions and climate change to be understood more at the central part of the education systems, which was not the case and which still is not the case yet. Now the partnership was created in order to make sure that we deliver collectively, based on the understanding that none of our individual organizations can do this huge job alone in a timely manner. Next slide, please. So to connect with the partnership, now we have the four pillars of the partnership, which cuts across greening schools, curriculum, teacher training and education systems, capacities, and greening communities. So happy to share that as of today, we have 83 member states and more than 1,100 organizations who have joined the partnership to collaborate in the overall umbrella of the JEP. Next slide, please. So with this kind of collaborative work, since the UN Transforming Education Summit, now this is the first year anniversary, sort of a birthday, and we'll be celebrating birthdays every COP. So we hope that COPs will be the mark for us to assess where we have come from and how we are going to move forward in the future. So as you can see, last September, we launched the Greening Education Partnership at the test, and then had an inaugural meeting at COP27. It was a very small room with a few people, actually. And at that time, we did not know how this partnership will turn out, how it's going to evolve. But then since the beginning of last year, when we first had this first working group meetings, which is running every quarterly, we now realize that there's so much interest for collaboration, sharing of experiences, sharing of stories. So that culminated into this huge network by the time of COP28. And here, this is really the moment to take it to the next level. So at COP28, in the lead up to COP28, we tried to also renew the political commitment around climate change education across the member states. And this was done in particular through the Education Climate Declaration. Next slide, please. So in this declaration, you can see briefly here, and the declaration is available on UNESCO's website, that it talks about how we can take actions around mitigate and invest for climate change through the four pillars of the Greening Education Partnership. And this one-page simple declaration, which is accompanied by a longer document, which is serving as the background document, co-drafted by the Greening Education Partnership members. Now this declaration has been endorsed by 40 countries in the lead up to COP28. So I'm happy to share that they will be forming the founding partners and try to continue to mobilize further political commitments around how we can make this quality climate education possible jointly together. Next slide, please. And around these efforts, you can see these 40 countries, and perhaps you may recognize whether or not your country is involved in this list of 40. And if it hasn't yet been listed, please do talk to your leaders and your counterparts to try to mobilize further efforts to make sure that we have as many political willingness brought together around this partnership and declaration. Next slide, please. So as a part of these efforts, then concretely about this contextualization of climate education and what we can do together, what we had realized during the 1 year's conversation around the Greening Education Partnership, which is actually led by all the panelists here today, what was clear was that we need to first establish a common language about what we mean by climate education. What is the quality climate education that young people are demanding, and how do we operationalize that in schools and curriculum, in teacher training and education systems and communities. So each working group has now embarked on this whole journey, and as a contribution to Pillar 1 and 2, UNESCO has started to draft, together with the working groups 1 and 2, the Green School Quality Standard and Greening Curriculum Guidance. So first, Green School Quality Standard talks about what are the basic standards, the minimum basic standards by which we can define a school, especially by teaching and learning, but also school facilities, operations, school governance, and school engagement with communities. So this draft is currently now available, and what we will do is that the second draft is now launched at COP28 for further consultation, and once this is ready, we hope to have it published by summer next year, with the objective of being able to use this as a monitoring tool to define how many schools in each country have been greened according to this standard, and with our collective objective to reach 50% of schools greened by 2030. Next slide, please. And the second part of this work is on the greening curriculum guidance. So this is to define what we mean by quality climate education that needs to be in curriculum. According to UNESCO study, we have found that less than half of the 100 countries' national curriculum frameworks reference the single word of climate change. So they don't even recognize climate change as any topic of importance up to now. So now we have to talk about, and whenever there is climate change in the curriculum, it is oftentimes connected to science education or geography classes, and limited very much to the environment pillar of sustainability. But as we talked about earlier about the concept of greening education, it is also about social and economic aspects of climate change and how we prepare ourselves. For example, as Deb mentioned, as Temilade mentioned, climate justice and engagement with that perspective is much more something that young people are demanding. So social aspects, but also from the economic aspects, as we are now at this COP28 historically talking about phasing out of fossil fuels, then now we have to talk about and start envisioning what does a post-carbon green economies look like, and how can we design this together with the younger generation. So these aspects need to be in the curriculum already, so that this new generation really leads that transformation of our societies, as well as also being provided to the adults as part of the TVET and lifelong learning efforts. So this curriculum guidance, which is also ready now for a second consultation, touches upon these three pillars through these 6 aspects, especially also focusing on the cognitive, social, emotional, behavioral learnings by age groups starting from 5-year-olds to 18 plus. So you can see in this draft that this matrix of different pockets of learning needs to be addressed through learning outcomes. And this broad learning outcomes that is defined as the common language at global level will be shared with all the member states' ministries of education, but also all the experts and partners, so that we can build this contextualization work around a basic minimum common language. So I think this is very important to synergize and connect with all the amazing work that OCE, FEE, CLEAR, and also Temilade's networks are working on, in order to make sure that we are building on the same ground and try to achieve this greening of curriculum by also 2030. So next slide, please. So these 2 QR codes are now ready. So please do, and of course this information is also available at UNESCO's website on Greening Education Partnership. So please have a look at these 2 QR codes. It's linked with our little survey, which invites you to share your point of view, what is missing, what needs to be strengthened, what needs to be changed, so that we can compile and revise for next rounds of versions next year to be finalized by summer. So we invite you to really have a look from your perspectives and share your point of view. Next slide, please. So this is coming from my end, and also for any further information regarding the Greening Education Partnership, and also the information about joining the partnership. If you are not yet a member, please scan this QR code or the link on the website. And if there's any question, we'll be happy to take from the JEP email as listed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Won, for the presentation of the Green Education Partnership and its goals and where it aims to go. As you mentioned, indeed, on this table, you have many of the co-leaders of this partnership, and I think it just goes to show that we are all committed behind it, and I've seen every person in the audience is scanning those QR codes for you. So, with this, I propose we move on to the Q&A part of this session, if everyone agrees. I have a few questions, but before I get to them, perhaps just to see in the audience if someone has already a question. No questions? No question. Looking at a person who has listened to every single word we've said with so much attention. Oh, wait, it's coming. The microphone is coming. I don't think our online panelists can hear.
Got it now, I think.
Oh, no, it works.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. That was very interesting. My name's Scott Strachan. I'm from the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow, in the UK. And there we are on the cusp of essentially putting a call out to all of our 4 faculties to come up with a 3-year action plan to embed education for sustainable development across all degree programs. That's the culmination of a lot of work from the bottom up. And the main thing that has resulted in this has been a change in something called the subject benchmark statements, which the Quality Assurance Association for Higher Education produce periodically. They revise it periodically. And for the first time, it's a general guidance for all degree programs. And for the first time, they included explicitly that all degree programs should include education for sustainable development. So that was an external lever that we were able to pull on to get the decision makers in our institution to make the change that needs to be made. That's for higher education, and a lot of the challenges that you've been talking about seem to be mainly, I would assume, kind of K-12 type. When you're referring to schools, I'm getting the impression that you're talking about, you know, the kind of younger students. But a lot of the challenges that you've talked about around capacity building, trying to come up with scalable models for the delivery of this, are all challenges that we're facing in higher education as well. Not all of our staff will know the ins and outs of climate change to a level where they're comfortable then bringing it into their classroom and contextualizing it as you've shown. So a lot of the tools and the frameworks and the guidance that you've talked about here are much needed for higher education as well, I feel. So I'd be interested to know, you know, if your organisations, there was some mention perhaps of some involvement. You know, I think you talked about the EcoCampus, and perhaps, you know, perhaps UNESCO more broadly have got some more guidance in this. But I'm interested to know if, you know, what is there being done to support the higher education part of the education system?
Yeah, thank you very much. Perhaps I propose we start with Daniel here on the floor, so we can share perhaps a bit more about EcoCampus, and then we go back to Won, because the Green Education Partnership does not stop at K-12 actually, and I'm sure Won can share a bit more about that work on higher education as well.
So I think, as I said, at least in our case, it was an organic growth. And it took us some time to realize that we're not dealing with the same audience, not in terms of our capacities, the capacities that we, for delivering a program in higher education, we needed to, up our game. And also in terms of what happens, the complexity of, and the challenges that you're facing within higher education, from freedom, academic freedom, unions, there's a whole bunch of things that happen sometimes that you don't see in a kindergarten that you need to deal with. But I think from our perspective, that the realization that there's a huge area to develop there is we've understood that. We are starting to form collaborations with other organizations that are working with higher education in order to build this, student unions, associations of universities, regional groups of universities, and so on. And in fact, this April we'll have our first ever EcoCampus conference. Another two things that we are looking at, particularly because you remember I said that we run eco schools, and we also run tourism-based programs, is to look at teacher training campuses as a target, as a specific target for us, because it's very important for us to try and not only teach teachers how, let's say climate change, but also give them the experience of what it actually means in an organization. So have that hands-on experience that then can be translated into eco-schools when they get to teach in schools. The other is looking at higher hospitality schools. So that's very important for us. So how do we actually educate about climate change, about sustainability and environment in the hospitality industry, and how does that then manifest itself in the management of hotels and in the connection between the hotels and the public that comes to these hospitalities as customers. And I think maybe one would be the next person that could answer about this, because I think this is something UNESCO has been also dealing with as part of the GEP.
Go ahead, Won.
Yes, hello. Okay. I keep hearing myself, so that was a bit. Yeah. So regarding this question, I think, in fact, in the Greening Education Partnership, of course, there are many higher education institutions, and there's a huge need for us to have that specific focus on higher education in a particular dedicated way. So, of course, traditionally, UNESCO has a section on higher education. We work around the networks such as HESI and International Alliance for Universities and other partners to promote ESG around the 17 SDGs. But while that is all traditionally going, particularly around the Greening Education and Greening Education Partnership, I think this is the moment for us to see how that alliance among higher education institutions could be formed within the partnership to discuss and take it to the next level. Because each higher education institutions that are already members of the JEP are doing amazing work, and they come with their rich experiences and interesting ideas, but it's just that connecting the dots specifically for higher education is also needed because there's a very specialized context within these institutions. So I think this is now you're raising rather a next step in the challenge. And I really hope that if you're not already a member of JEP, do join. And also as a member of the JEP, if you can join this new group. We've been discussing with UNESCO Institute for Higher Education and others to start early next year, a special call, similar to how we did for youth groups. For youth groups, we had a special call and started to discuss among youth group, Temilade was there and others, to discuss how youth engagement within the JEP could be strategized to amplify the impact. Same thing for higher education. There's a discussion to have an open call early next year to have a special group on higher education. So we hope that this conversation today can continue and be taken into more strategic documents and actions through that specialized group early next year. So looking forward to seeing you in that meeting in 2024. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan. Yes, just before we move on to the next
And
question,
Sean,
just want to make sure we get everyone's input on the
Sean.
panel. Yeah, exactly. Deb, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add one other thing there. The way in which we look at a system and understand who are the main actors in the system or stakeholders, who to invite in, how to change a system, those are very similar, regardless of if we're talking about K-12 or universities, even though the goals and the learning itself inside the system might be different. So we do have experience with other types of systems that we have worked to change. And I'll reach out to you directly, Scott, to share some of that thinking. But yeah, HESI definitely is a really major network for thinking about some of that effort. And it's a critical move because right now we don't want a separation of educators and scientists. And that has historically been a really big problem inside climate change. So we want to make sure that there's deep interconnection between those communities.
Anyone else on the panel would like to add, or shall we go to the next question? Okay, let's go to the next question. Sir.
Thank you. I appreciate. Pierluigi Bozzi, I am professor and coordinator of International University Network on Cultural Diversity and Biodiversity, established under the agreement with the United Nations Secretariat of the Convention of Biological Diversity. We are universities, student associations. It's a think tank, cultural movement, focused on the Global South. So, very practical question. Unfortunately, I was in a meeting, so I arrived late. To all the panelists, this is a wonderful event. How our universities members at institutional level, at individual level, as professors, head of departments, coordinator of student associations, our members in general, how they can participate, contribute to your initiatives at very, very, very operative level. It means on 14 December, we will exchange an email and I will have an agenda of activities that as international coordinator and international team, we can propose to colleagues, universities, professors, students, coordinators who are not here, who don't know anything about. Of course, our task is to explain, we will have webinars, we will present, for example, your activities, etc. But finally, the question will be, okay, wonderful, how can we participate and provide the contributions at very concrete level? Thank you so much. For all the panelists, yeah, including a JEP, of course.
Okay, let's go with David first, and then I'll pick and choose unless we have volunteers to go.
Yeah,
go ahead,
thank you
David.
for this question and for your commitment to action, actually. As for me at the Office for Climate Education, so you missed that part, but we are focusing on primary and secondary sector, but it does not mean that we do not...
For the Faculty of Education,
Yeah.
it's not only higher education.
Yeah. Actually, we do work with a lot of universities worldwide and on different aspects. First aspect is the research. Because even with, basically today, a lot of research has been made so far, and we know basically what works in terms of educational approaches and so on. But we have a lot of difficulties to measure the impact of the action. And when we want to implement, if you are doing with a very small scale project in a few schools, it's not a problem. But if you want to scale up, if you want to involve the policymakers, the first question is what is the impact of the action and how to measure it. And for this, especially, we need a lot of research. And universities, especially human and social sciences, can be very helpful. But on the implementation aspects also, we do value a lot the participation of academics, let's say. At the Office for Climate Education, we work with academics on two aspects. The first one is the design of curriculum and education materials. It is of very high importance to base these education materials on solid science, especially when we deal with climate change. A lot of misinformation, of disinformation is available, and teachers, most of them, they just discover this topic and they are a bit lost in the ocean of this information and misinformation. So we have to help them to figure out what do we know about climate change, what don't we know about climate change, and yes, we do need the scientific community, especially universities, for this. On another operational point of view, it is also very helpful to have academics, researchers, or engineers also to participate to a teacher professional development. This professional development has to rely both on science and on pedagogy and also on local projects and so on, but it is very important that practitioners, people who are doing climate research or biodiversity or whatsoever, they could provide some knowledge to the teachers. So we use a lot of researchers to train teachers in service or pre-service. Of course, pre-service is very often the mission of the university, but in service also could be an asset. And last but not least, very often academics and universities are very well structured organizations, and they have access to quite high-level policymakers, far more easier than primary schools, for example. And when we want to implement large-scale projects and we want to involve the policymakers, the scientific community, it could be universities, it could be academies of science, IPCC focal points, etc., etc. They are very, very powerful for us to be able to catch the policymakers and to involve them into this process. So for me, there is a lot of things that we can do together, actually.
I'll just speak loud. Oh, no, it works. Before I give the floor to Daniel, just to add to what my colleague David is saying, to exchange an email in 2 days, we will be launching soon a call for applications for our Climate and Education Summer University happening in Toulouse, in France, for European early career scientists to come and meet with teachers as well for a week. So that is a very concrete next step you could add to your list. And now over to Daniel.
I don't remember the professor's name, so I apologize. Luigi. You missed also my part of the presentation, I think. Yes, we don't look at the campus, at the university in our program that's called EcoCampus, only at the learning, at the curricular element. We look at the whole. It's a whole institutional approach. So, for example, it's not only your faculty members, but it's also the technical people on the university that have to buy into this. It's the student unions that have to buy into it. It might be the a municipality which is living, which the campus might be part of, that needs to be highly engaged in this. And so it's a bit more complex from our perspective than just the teaching. There's a whole element and a whole process that needs to take place in order to change the culture of an organization, in this case, a university. And if I may, I'll just give us a little, like an anecdote or a little story that really, you know, that's when I started to understand how complex this can be, is that we started to run eco-campuses by our member organization in Ireland, which is called Antashka. It's the National Trust in Ireland. And they had this organic growth from school through the students into the universities. And we had Trinity College, and we had Cork College join us. And then the Hospital University of Cork said, wait a moment, we want to be part of this. And we said, but you're a hospital. And they said, yeah, but we have a medical school in the hospital, we have a nursing school, and we have a dentistry school as well. So we have these 3 schools on the campus. We want to be part of this, which took us by surprise. And then we said, well, only if the whole hospital is going to be involved in this, not just the teaching or the whole hospital. And suddenly we were dealing with the radioactive waste, and you know, it was just bringing this thing to such a complex level. It took them 4 years to get through the process, to be assessed. Obviously, the assessment was at a very high level. It was done by government-level officials in Ireland that came, and international experts, and they got it. But by the time they finished this, and I'm talking about 10 years ago, the whole motor car fleet of the university, of the hospital was changed. The whole bus and local transportation around the campus was changed. So I'm not only talking about what was happening in terms of the learning, the whole infrastructure of this hospital through the campus on it was completely transformed. And I think that to me is there's a lot of power, but it won't happen through an email in 2 days. It's a long process.
Just before we go to the next question, Deb or Won, would you like to add something?
I wanted to say something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Temilade.
Go ahead, Temilade.
Can you hear me? Okay. That was loud. So gleaning from my experience, because I attended the University of Sussex in the UK, one of the things I've noticed is that the university system is so complex. And sometimes if you don't kind of attach, you know, there's this sustainability ranking they do in the UK. And now I've seen so many universities trying to say, yeah, we're really sustainable, we're doing this. And going to school, we had because I was the deputy chair of the sustainability committee, and it was really functional to the point where we did a campaign to say we didn't want plastic bottles in our cafes, and it was really successful. So they held the student body in really high regard, and that student body also filtered into the full school sustainability, you know, committee that had like the people who were leading the school. One of the major things I've seen is that for schools, you know, it also has to be very student-led, because I've seen that when you have, I wouldn't say resistance in that mindset, but when you have a push from the students also, it puts the school on their toes. And I saw that with Success a lot, where, you know, we said we wanted this thing, and the school didn't want to be in the bad books, because before you wake up, you know, Sussex news is already everywhere. Oh, Sussex did this. So nobody really wanted to be in the bad books. And they literally said yes to all of our campaigns. And they did it very swiftly. In the space of 1 year, I know so many things we were able to do, right? So I'll just say that, you know, we need that student-led agency in schools, and not just have it as something external, but very, very incorporated as a student body, filtering into the university and institutions themselves. So yeah, I just wanted to say that based on my personal experience. Yeah.
Thank you, Temi. Thank you, Temilade, for sharing that their experience. I think community building is extremely important in higher education, and student bodies have been at the forefront of actually bringing sustainability into these structures. Deb, go ahead.
Yeah, I have half my life is as a research scientist at the University of Washington in Seattle. And I have worked with universities across Canada and the United States in different ways. I think whenever we're thinking about how to connect across scales, like the question was asked, is we can't get too global when we're trying to do the local work. So we need to actually build networked and relational connections across those scales. So for instance, all the universities in Washington State are connecting together to learn and teach around pre-service teacher education. Because of that work, which is funded by the legislature, I really think I have to name funding every time I speak about this. But those universities are all networked together because it's state funding. They're building projects together so that they can build capacity and learn from each other. Because they're working in pre-service teacher education, they reach out in their own institutions to scientists and social scientists and others working at the university and start to pull them into the work too. And so we're building across the different activities that people have responsibilities for in their own jobs and moving it all forward. And so that initiative in Washington State is connected with others in other places, and we're learning more and more across those efforts. Having individual programs and students connect from the university level all the way up to the UN and back down may not be the most impactful. It might be better for those networks or those institutions to connect up. It just depends on what your goal is as you move and work in this area.
Thank you, Deb. Being very mindful of the time, we have about 3 minutes left. I would just like to give the floor to the last question we had from the audience. Wait. We need the microphone. Who has the microphone?
Test. Hi, I'm Nicholas from Singapore, and I'm an educator that teaches youths 13 to 16. My question really is, at a more classroom level, at a local level, how do I convince youths to take action? Because the case in Singapore is that youths are aware of the impacts. As a country, we don't necessarily experience the serious impacts that our vulnerable communities face, but students are empowered. They already have the knowledge about climate. They know the science behind it, but the gap really is the part where they take action. So that's my first question. How do we convince our youth to take concrete action with the knowledge they have? And then the second one is a rather generic question on how can we create more buy-in from stakeholders as we talk about, building that whole process, that community, because there are many competing needs and interests. For example, one at the top of my mind, if I were to propose and push my agenda, it would be like academic stress. People just want to see results, and where does climate fit in? Yeah. So my second question would be, how can we create a stronger buy-in to create that whole ecosystem that we envision? Thank you.
Thank you so much for this question. Temilade, go ahead.
I used to be a teacher, and then I started my organization where we started going to schools informally. And one of the things I've seen when it comes to climate change and moving from knowledge to action, something that has really helped is storytelling and showing them the people that have done it before, right? And trying to also paint a picture. It's like, oh yeah, I can do this, but there's somebody out there who can actually do this, and so I can replicate what the person is doing. Me coming to COP and seeing so many, just being at the Teachers for the Planet event, I was really so inspired, and I've written so many things to take back home, to implement in my programs. And that's how it happens, literally, the ripple effect of saying, I've seen somebody who has done this, and I'm going to replicate. Another thing is using an example that they can relate to. So if there's anybody in your region who is already doing something like that, it's easier to have such an example, so it's not too far-fetched from what they know. And I think I can relate to the normal thing where you're just going through life. And to be honest, in a place like Nigeria, climate change is not even top of the list for many people, maybe in paper, but not in reality. So communicating that science to everyday life is very important. Again, show them pictures, show them what is going on in the world, and let them just be connected emotionally to what is happening, but not in a very doom way, right? Just like she was mentioning, Deb was saying that we need solution-oriented teaching. empower them with the words to say, oh yeah, this is going on, but there's also solutions. So we are not helpless in that case, right? So yeah, just from my experience, these are the things that I would say you should do as an educator. Thank you.
Thank you, Temilade. 30 seconds per second for the next answers, please, and then we have to finish.
I think another thing that we need to think about is, particularly if we're talking ACE, because ACE is, we're not only talking about formal education, and about the ages that you said, at least our data that we collected, and I'm absolutely sure that this can be seen in many other places, is that at that age, we lose the boys. We lose the boys. The boys fall off the wagon for a few years at least. At that 14 to 18 age, before they go into maybe higher education. And I think that as an educational system, we need to think about other ways where we can get young boys involved in this and find the agents that that they listen to and they're influenced by. Maybe it could be their coaches in football clubs, I don't know. But this is something that I've been putting a lot of thought in, because I see, and even here, if you walk around and you see how many girls are participating in our Young Reporters for the Environment, it's 70 to 30%, 80 to 20. That's the, so we see that females are much more inclined to participate in this than the male boys, and I think that's a challenge for us to think about.
Okay. David, would you like to add something in 30 seconds to finish?
Yeah, I will try. Even if your school or your direct environment is not specifically challenged by climate impact, there is still room for action, because you can work on climate justice level.
Okay. I do apologize, Won and Deb. We've run out of time on this session. I hope that's all right. I have put back the first slide on the screen with our contact details. If you have any further urgent questions or less urgent, you can also contact us. Please feel free to do so. And thank you so much for your interest today. And thank you to all of our panelists in the middle of the night and early in the morning to have joined us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Won. Bye, Deb. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Can we ask
Have a good day.
Yes, absolutely.
Hi, hello.
Maybe that guy.
Oh, okay. Okay, she's coming, don't worry. Someone is coming. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.